31 Nobel laureates just signed a letter saying the signs of fascism are here. 3 Yale historians who study authoritarian collapse for a living just fled to Canada. A democracy index rated the United States 55 out of 100. The DOJ is investigating political opponents. The president jokes all the time now about canceling elections. Federal agencies are now posting actual classic Nazi slogans and artwork. And some of you are saying that you won't vote in 2028 because the Democratic nominee likely won't be progressive enough. We won't have a country left. If we lose in 2028, there might not be a 2032 election. And this isn't catastrophizing. This is the documented playbook for competitive authoritarianism. So in today's episode, we're going to talk about why ideological purity is a suicide pact for the Democratic Party. And like I said, this episode was born out of observation because you know what I'm starting to see a lot of right now? Social media posts from friends and acquaintances saying, ugh, I hate Gavin Newsom. If he's the nominee, I'm just not going to vote. Or I'm going to vote third party, or I'm going to vote independent. I don't know how else to put it, but my message here is grow the fuck up. And how we have to start building coalitions, because now is not the time to fuck around and find out. We've already seen that. We've already been there. Let's keep it short and sweet with the housekeeping today. If you're enjoying the show, please follow it on Instagram. That's the primary channel. You can do so at We Saw the Devil Podcast, Twitter and Facebook at We Saw the Devil. And then if you want to financially back the show, head over to Patreon. You'll get ad-free episodes, link in the show notes to all of that. And if you want to support the show on Patreon, but you can't right now, trust me, I get it. Share the episodes. Leave reviews, tell your friends, ask them for reviews, because every single bit of that helps keep this podcast independent and honest. So without further ado, let's just get on into it. This is kind of an episode that I've been looking forward to as well as dreading, because obviously you listeners want to know where I am at politically. I've been kind of reporting the news and throwing in my 2 cents, but I want to get into something that, again, based on observation, I'm starting to see a lot of my fellow leftists pulling the same shit we did under Kamala. I have some bones to pick. And this has been gnawing at me for years now because I see it, and it is such a phenomenon that is just so unique to the Democratic Party. And I can't stand it. And I'm sure this episode also is going to piss some people off, but honestly, that's kind of the point of this show at this point. I've said this once early on in the podcast that I'm a liberal. I do not consider myself to be progressive. And before the Twitter and Facebook mobs come for me, yes, I know there is a great deal of overlap between liberals and progressives. Yes, I know we are technically on the same side, but there is a bit of difference. And I want to have an honest conversation about what I see is a major weakness on the Democratic side and why I think it's so important that we tackle this and have open discussions about this. As I mentioned earlier, I've already seen people, smart, politically engaged and informed people, saying they won't vote for Gavin Newsom if he's the eventual presidential nominee because of his position on Israel. I personally know at least a dozen people who didn't vote for Kamala Harris because of Palestine. And you know what happened? Trump won. And Gaza? It's been razed. So tell me exactly how that protest vote worked out for Palestinians. So this episode is about why ideological purity is a luxury that we can no longer afford. Also, I want to touch on why Republicans keep winning, even though their candidates are objectively horrible. It's because they fall in line and we just fracture. So without further delay, let's get into it. And I want to start with definitions because I'm a project manager and I like when words actually mean things. And this is going to be boiled down to the absolute purest form. If you want to do the hardcore research here, you can absolutely feel free to do so. That is not what this episode is about. So liberalism. Liberalism is rooted in Enlightenment values. Individual rights, rule of law, regulated markets, incremental reform, democratic institutions. We're the nerds who believe in progress through the system. We want universal health care, aggressive climate action, robust labor protections. But we also believe in working within existing structures to get there, even if it's much slower than we would like. Now, progressivism, and particularly modern progressivism, is rooted in deep skepticism of those institutions. Progressives see liberalism as too slow, too compromised, too tainted by capitalism and corporate interests. They typically want revolutionary change, not incremental reform. They're ready to, burn it all down and start over. And honestly, I get the frustration. I do. The system is broken in a lot of ways. But here's where shit gets complicated. So, according to a 2021 Pew Research study, progressive left voters, which about 6% of the US public, are most likely to say that compromise in politics is selling out. Meanwhile, moderate and liberal Democrats are typically far more open to incremental progress. And therein lies the fundamental tension. One side views compromise as pragmatism, and the other side views it as a moral failure. Matthew Iglesias wrote a fascinating article in The Atlantic, and he pointed out something super crucial here. He said progressives often mistake being more left with being more popular, but polling consistently shows that many progressive policies, defunding the police, the open borders rhetoric that we've seen, certain framings of Medicare for all, that they poll like absolute shit with swing voters and even moderate Democrats. And that's what's so difficult, is that I want many, if not most, borderline all of the same outcomes progressives want. But I also want to win elections, because you can't implement policy if you're perpetually in the minority, tweeting about how morally superior you are while Republicans dismantle voting rights. Which brings me to the deeper philosophical divide between these two worldviews, and trust me, it is actually bigger than you think. And let me get specific here, because I think a lot of people don't realize just how fundamentally different liberal and progressive worldviews actually are. And I'm going to give you 3 concrete examples of where we're not just disagreeing on tactics, right? Like the ultimate end goal, that we're pretty much on completely different fucking planets. I realize that this episode is more of a generalization and that people have their own independent thoughts and beliefs and may subscribe to one, party or call themselves a progressive, and we may disagree. I realize that there are obvious outliers, okay? But typically, capitalism. Let's talk about capitalism itself. For the most part, progressives want to dismantle it, right? Democratic socialism, worker ownership of the means of production, eat the rich, abolish billionaires. That's the progressive economic vision, right? They see capitalism as fundamentally irredeemable, inherently exploitative, and that the root cause of basically every societal ill, from racial inequality to climate change, is capitalism. And I disagree with that. Now, before you accuse me of being a corporate shithead or shill, I want to regulate the hell out of capitalism. I don't think Jeff Bezos should exist as a concept, right? His wealth is obscene, and it represents catastrophic policy failure in this country. But I also don't think that the solution is to nationalize Amazon or overthrow the economic system. Tax them at 50%, break up monopolies through aggressive antitrust enforcement, strengthen labor protections, implement a wealth tax, fund robust social programs with that revenue. But I'm not trying to replace capitalism with some other kind of system because, and I say this as someone who's read the history on it, every time that has been tried at scale, it ended badly. I love the Nordic model. Robust social safety nets, strong labor unions, progressive taxation, universal health care and education, all within a regulated capitalist framework. Denmark isn't socialist. Neither is Sweden. They're social democracies with market economies. That's not revolutionary, in my opinion. That's pragmatic, and critically, it actually fucking works. This divide shows up constantly in policy debates on the left. Progressives want to nationalize healthcare entirely. Government run, single payer, no private insurance allowed, period. I'm open to a public option that competes with private insurance and lets people choose. Progressives want to break up Amazon, Google, and Facebook into tinier pieces. I understand the desire for that. I want to regulate them heavily, enforce antitrust, make them pay their fair share, but I don't necessarily want to dismantle them entirely. And yes, I realize if you're, thinking about, okay, taxing company will just move abroad or X, Y, and Z. Yes, I realize no system is perfect. Just want to say that before someone comes for me there. But here's the thing, okay? At the end of the day, and this is ultimately what I care about, voters in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, the states that actually decide elections. They're not ready for economic revolution. They just want affordable health care, decent paying jobs, a fair shot at what they perceive to be the American dream. You can deliver that within a regulated capitalist system. You can't deliver it if you lose the election because you scared the shit out of suburban voters talking about seizing the means of production. This is going to make me sound like an old hag, but so be it. A lot of people believe, and I believe this as well, I believe that speech has consequences. One of the causes I would say most dear to my heart is free speech. And we've seen a lot of anti-free speech absolutism going on in the Democratic Party. They believe that it protects hate speech, that it empowers the wealthy or already powerful, that it marginalizes communities, and those marginalized communities need protection from hate speech, even if that means deplatforming, content moderation, or severe social consequences, especially for offensive speech. I believe in free speech, even when it's offensive, even when it's wrong, even when it makes me want to throw my laptop across the room and smack a bitch. You know why I believe that, though? Because I don't trust anyone, not corporations, not governments, not Twitter mobs, to be the arbiters of what constitutes acceptable speech. The answer to bad speech is more speech, not less. Who gets to decide what's harmful? Today, it might be Alex Jones spreading conspiracy theories. Fine, I don't give a shit about Alex Jones. But tomorrow, what happens when the people in power decide that criticism of Israel is harmful, or that labor organizing is harmful, or that merely discussing police brutality is harmful? Or, as we are starting to see now, discussing or describing this current administration or ICE is harmful or hate speech. This isn't hypothetical, it's already happening. Ron DeSantis is banning books in Florida. Republican states are criminalizing drag shows and trans healthcare. You think those fuckers won't weaponize your harmful speech framework against you the second they consolidate power? Free speech protects the vulnerable. It always has. And yes, that means protecting speech I find absolutely vile and abhorrent. Because the alternative is letting someone else decide what I'm allowed to say, the words that come out of your mouth hole. To me, that's far more dangerous than hearing some offensive words. Now, should speech have consequences? Sure. If you say something racist and fucked up at work, you might get fired. That's not censorship. That's accountability within your employment relationship. But there's a difference between facing consequences from your employer and then having an online mob try to destroy your life, get you fired, harass your friends and family, and ruin your reputation over a poorly worded tweet from 2011 that you've since apologized for. I believe in robust debate, even with bad faith actors. I believe that sunlight is the best disinfectant. Something that I'm noticing, and I'm really just not a fan of it, is that I'm seeing the far left wanting to shut down any debate if it's deemed problematic. And I'm sorry, that's not how liberal democracy works. That's not how we've ever made progress. Next up, I want to talk about identity politics and intersectionality. And this is the one that probably gets the most heated. So let me be very, very, very crystal clear up front. I care deeply about civil rights. I support anti-discrimination laws. I believe representation matters. I am absolutely not saying stop talking about marginalized communities. That is not in any capacity what I am saying. And what I do love about the progressive movement is that it does emphasize intersectionality in centering marginalized voices. Progressives believe that race, gender, sexuality, and class create unique experiences of oppression, and that these different experiences need tailored policy responses. And I understand that logic, and I've studied the theory. But here's my problem. When you make everything about identity politics, you fracture your coalition. And fractured coalitions lose elections, full stop. Universal policies are easier to pass, they're harder to repeal, and they build much broader support. Do you guys remember the 2020 primaries? Do you remember when progressives went off on Pete Buttigieg and Amy Klobuchar for not centering racial justice enough? Progressives were going off, and moderates worried that, okay, well, they're also screaming defund the police. That's absolutely rhetoric that would alienate these suburban swing voters. And guess what? It did. Democrats lost House seats in 2020 in districts Biden won, largely because of that messaging. And the thing about it is that progressives are absolutely correct. Up, down, left, right, every which way of center. Like, progressives are 100%. All of these things can be true. You can still be right and still lose. And when you lose, you help no one. You don't help Black people, trans people, LGBT, Hispanic people. Like, you don't help anyone. And all for what? So you can feel morally superior while Republicans implement their agenda? How is that working out for us right now? So I see that economics, speech, and identity, are the three big divides between progressives and liberals. And they're not minor quibbles about tactics or how we approach things. And, speaking of policy debates, let's talk about why progressive candidates are great for Brooklyn, but not a great idea for Pennsylvania. I'm going to be brutally honest. I do not believe that a progressive will win the presidency in the near future, not in this current electoral system. And if you're mad at me for saying that, I feel like you're just mad at reality and not actually me. AOC, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, they're incredibly popular in deep blue districts and among young, educated, very online, always informed voters. But the presidency isn't won in Brooklyn or Berkeley or Boston. It's won in Erie, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Maricopa County, Arizona. And those voters, they're not reading Pew Research or things like that. They're worried about grocery prices, how they're going to make it from paycheck to paycheck, what happens when they lose their job, whether their kids are going to die in a mass shooting, or if they have to work until they die because they can't retire. The American Magazine piece I referenced earlier put it bluntly. It said Democrats must face reality. They won't win by moving left. And the data backs this up unequivocally. In 2020, Joe Biden, a moderate, won the presidency. Meanwhile, progressive ballot measures in swing states consistently underperformed Biden's margins. But here's the nuance that I feel as though progressives hate hearing. You can absolutely win House districts. That's been proven. AOC's New York 14th, Ilhan Omar's Minnesota 5th. Progressive candidates can thrive there. New York City with Mamdani. Those voters want bold. They want unapologetic leftism. They want someone who will call capitalism a scam and demands Medicare for all. And that's amazing. I love it. That's actually how representative democracy is supposed to work. Different districts, different representatives. It's a beautiful thing. The problem is that when progressives demand that the entire Democratic Party adopt their platform, or else they won't vote, or they'll vote for a protest candidate, they'll burn it all down. That's not coalition building. That's hostage taking. And that's how we lose winnable elections, which, in case you haven't noticed, we can't really lose anything right now. According to Pew, progressive left voters make up about 6% of the US public and 12% of Democratic voters. You cannot win a general election with 12% of your entire party's support. It's mathematically impossible. And yet progressives have an outsized influence on Democratic messaging because they're loud. A lot of the time they're typically younger, and let's be honest, they're really good at shaming people. And yet progressives do seem to have an outsized influence on Democratic Party messaging. Meanwhile, the median voter, the person who actually decides elections, thinks that we've gone too far left on cultural issues and not far enough left on economic ones. That's the tragic irony. Voters want economic populism. They want higher wages, affordable health care, corporations paying their fair share. Those policies pull through the roof. But they don't want to be lectured about microaggressions or told they're complicit in systemic oppression just because they use the wrong pronoun once. And before you say, Robin, well, you should all care about those things. Absolutely. But you don't get to decide what voters care about. You have to meet them where they are, not where you wish they were. That's politics 101. And here's the deal. Progressives should absolutely keep pushing in their districts. Win those seats, y'all. Be your uncompromising, loud selves. Demand the moon, because that is so incredibly valuable. But stop demanding that candidates in districts where Republicans poll, maybe up 5 to 10 points, stop pretending that those districts in Ohio will adopt your platform. They can't win that way. And when they lose, Republicans win. And when Republicans win, everyone fucking suffers. And here's the thing that drives me absolutely fucking insane. And I see it every single election cycle. Republicans fall in line, Democrats fall in love, and then progressives fall into purity spirals that cost us elections. Let me paint you a picture. In 2016, Ted Cruz called Trump a pathological liar. Lindsey Graham said he was a race-baiting, xenophobic bigot. Marco Rubio implied that he had a small dick on a debate stage. These people hated Trump, loathed him viscerally, and very, very, very publicly. And yet, when Trump won the nomination, every single one of them fell in line. Cruz phone banked for him. Graham became his best golf buddy. Rubio became a loyal soldier, as we see now. He was rewarded handsomely for it because they understood something fundamental. Losing with purity is still losing. Meanwhile, on the left, we're out here conducting circular firing squads over every single fucking issue. I've already seen people, again, smart, politically engaged people that I have the utmost respect for, saying they won't vote for Gavin Newsom if he were to get the nomination because of his stance on Israel and Palestine. And look, I'm not saying that's not an important issue. It absolutely is. But think about the alternative. Imagine a President Tom Cotton, whoever, J.D. Vance, whoever the Republican nominee would be. They will be better for Palestine, for Palestinians, for anyone? I mean, let's do the math on this. I personally know at least a dozen people who didn't vote for Kamala Harris because of Biden's handling of Gaza. They were sending a message, right? Making a principled stand. And you know what happened? Trump won. In Gaza, it's been fucking leveled. The humanitarian crisis got worse, not better. So for those of you who did that, tell me, what the fuck did that accomplish? Did it help Palestinians? Did it move US policy? Did it achieve anything except letting Trump back into power to further destroy all of it? And this is what I mean by the left's suicidal inability to build coalitions. We demand 100% alignment on almost every single issue, or we peace out. We walk away. We'd rather lose with purity than win with compromise. Meanwhile, the right and the Republicans will vote for a guy who cheated on all three of his wives with porn stars, paid hush money, committed bank fraud, incited an insurrection, and has the moral character of a rabid fucking weasel because he will appoint conservative judges and cut their taxes. There is a great piece from UC Berkeley's. It's from their alumni magazine, and it's called Please Don't Call Me a Liberal. And it's an article, and it kind of explores this fracturing on the left. The author argues that progressives have turned coalition building into an impossible purity test. Almost any compromise is seen as betrayal, and the result is that we lose constantly. Because the cold, hard truth that no one wants to hear is that politics, at its core, is about addition, not subtraction. You have to find common ground, not by demanding that everyone agree with you on every single item, or you'll take your ball and go home. Republicans understand this instinctively. They're a coalition, think about it, of libertarians, evangelicals, corporate donors, white nationalists, and then also those suburban moderates. They agree on almost nothing other than they all hate Democrats and want to lower taxes. And yet they win constantly because they prioritize power over ideological purity. And we need to learn that lesson yesterday. And it's not just about the electoral strategy, even though I know I've spent the first part of this episode harping on that. It's also about tactics. And this is actually another piece that I wanted to discuss in this podcast episode of what I'm seeing in LA and Minneapolis, because tactics are super important. This pisses me off because I always put myself into these shoes. I'll get there in a moment, and it makes me so angry. Let's talk about protest tactics. Specifically, let's talk about why blocking highways is the dumbest fucking thing that you can do if you actually want to win the hearts and minds of the people. I've seen this tactic deployed repeatedly by climate activists, pro-Palestine protesters, Black Lives Matter groups, basically every major progressive cause over the last decade, right? And every single time I want to scream into the void. Blocking roads does not win support, it pisses people off. You know what happens when you block I-95 or I-40 during rush hour? People miss work. They lose a day's pay that they can't afford. They miss doctor's appointments that they waited months for. Parents can't pick up their kids from daycare and get charged a late fee. Ambulances get stuck. People having medical emergencies can't get to hospitals. And before you say, well, Robin, people are already dying in Gaza or from climate change or police violence, I know. I agree with you on the underlying issues. Wholeheartedly agree with you. But here's what you're missing. That person stuck in traffic, they probably agree with you too. Or they would have until you made them late for work, cost them their job potentially, cost them money, or just treated them like an acceptable casualty in your little moral crusade. I've said this before and I will say it again with absolute sincerity. If I ever have a pet emergency, if one of my dogs is dying in my back seat or sick and I need to get them to the emergency vet stat or they will die, and you're blocking the road, I will run you over. I'm not even kidding a little bit. You do not get to hold strangers hostage to prove a point. Full stop. Full motherfucking stop. And the data backs me up on this. They actually did a study on protest tactics, and they found that disruptive protests that inconvenience bystanders reduce public support by an average of 15%. You're not raising awareness. You're not building some, form of solidarity as you sing Kumbaya hanging over the overpass. You're literally making your cause less popular through antagonism. There are incredibly effective protest tactics throughout history. The Montgomery bus boycott, sit-ins at segregated lunch counters, the March on Washington, United Farm Workers boycotts. These targeted the actual institutions and power structures, not just random commuters trying to get to their shitty jobs. And here's the thing that really gets me too. Most of the people doing this highway blocking shit are angry 20-somethings who aren't totally informed on the history or nuance of the issues they're protesting. And I'm not saying their passion isn't valid, because bless them, right? But you know what actually changes policy? Voting, organizing, running for office, unfortunately, lobbying, litigation, building coalitions with labor unions, churches, community organizations, becoming the staffer who drafts the legislation. That shit is boring. It's not Instagram friendly. It doesn't get you clout. I get it, but it works. Blocking a highway gets you arrested, alienates potential allies, and accomplishes absolutely jack squat except making you feel morally superior while you're sitting in a jail cell. Let's be real. And if your goal is to feel righteous rather than to actually win an election, fine. Be honest about that. But don't pretend that you're building a movement by doing this. You're just being performative with your friends. And that actually does connect to the larger problem here. And that's the problem that I mentioned. I mean, what this episode is essentially about is ideological purity as a substitute for effective politics. And again, let me be crystal clear. I'm not saying that we should abandon our principles. I'm saying that we need to be strategic on the left about how we fight. There's a difference between compromise and capitulation, and progressives seem constitutionally incapable of distinguishing between the two. There's a great piece from the New York Times by Ezra Klein where he kind of breaks down the fundamental differences between liberal and progressive worldviews. He writes, liberals believe in reform, progressives believe in revolution. And in American politics, revolution doesn't work. Now, again, that may be true and may work well in places like Boston, New York City, and so forth. He's absolutely right, though. The American system, with its federalism, separation of powers, checks and balances, and unfortunately, whether we love it or hate it, the electoral college, it's designed, our whole system is designed to resist rapid change. That's frustrating as hell. I know, I hate it, but unfortunately, it's reality. And I think, honestly, that's where I lie. Like, in beliefs, yes, I would consider myself a progressive. We align on 99.999% of issues. You can rage against that reality, or you can try to actively work within it to achieve progress. Those are your options now. It means playing the long game. It means building coalitions. It means winning local elections, state legislatures, House seats, pushing the Overton window left incrementally over time, taking wins where you can get them and building on them. But it does not mean throwing away elections because a candidate isn't perfect. It does not mean letting fascists win because Gavin Newsom's position on one or two issues isn't exactly what you want. Let me give you a concrete example. The Affordable Care Act, aka Obamacare. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't single payer. It kept the private insurance industry intact. Progressives fucking hated it. But you know what? It gave healthcare coverage to 20 million people who didn't have it before. 20 million real human beings whose lives got materially better because we passed an imperfect bill. I call that success. We need to be builders. We need to win so we can actually help people and so we can actually build. And right now, the stakes are too high for anything else. And to close up this episode, I just want to talk about probably the most important piece I'm going to make in this entire episode, this next election. Let's get real for a second. And I mean really, really, really real. No snark, no, whatever. Just, I want to talk about reality. We will not have a country left if the left keeps doing this purity spiral bullshit. As I said earlier, I'm not catastrophizing. I'm looking at what's actually happening right now in January of 2026 and projecting forward based on trends here. I just covered in last week's episode about, the 31 Nobel laureates signing the letter, the Yale historians. I also mentioned it in the intro of this episode. Again, ICE is operating right now, guys, with masked agents without identification badges. The DOJ is opening investigations into its political opponents for the crime of just criticizing the administration. The president is joking about canceling elections. I've already gone through this in the intro, but, just kind of recapping here. And as of recently, we're threatening military invasion of our own NATO allies over a fucking real estate deal. Canada came out today and said that if we attacked Greenland, they would fight us militarily. And some of you are out here saying you won't vote for the Democratic nominee in 2028 because they're not progressive enough on one or two specific issues. Are you fucking kidding me right now? Let me spell this out in terms so clear that all of you will understand. If we lose in 2028, there might not be a 2032 election. I'm not talking about, the Republicans will be bad for 4 years and then we'll just vote them out. I'm talking about the systemic dismantling of all of our democratic institutions. It's already well underway. I'm talking about a Supreme Court that's already gutted voting rights, blessed unlimited gerrymandering, granted presidents broad immunity for official acts. I'm talking about a political party that's openly discussed deploying the military against protesters. As of 7 p.m. this evening, in the headlines of my news, talked about the unit in Alaska being on standby to deploy to Minneapolis. They're already criminalizing dissent. They are consolidating power through every single lever imaginable and available right now. You think I'm exaggerating? Trump already tried to overturn an election he lost. He incited a mob to attack the Capitol. He is currently threatening the Insurrection Act against American cities that won't cooperate with ICE raids. And that was when he still had some guardrails, a few adults in the room, some people willing to say no. Those people are almost completely gone now, purged, replaced with loyalists. The next Trump administration, or the next Republican administration, whoever it is, will be staffed entirely by true believers who will do whatever they're told without question. The Supreme Court has already ruled that presidents have sweeping immunity. The Senate will likely be Republican. The House could flip. What do you think happens then? We've seen this playbook before. In Hungary, Turkey, Russia, and elsewhere. They consolidate power. They purge the civil service and replace career people with, their own appointees. They weaponize the DOJ against critics, which they're already doing big time. They restrict voting access even further through targeted voter suppression. Seen it. They gerrymander districts even more aggressively. Underway. They pack courts at every level with right-wing ideologues who will serve for the next 40 years. And your protest vote, your stand, your big stand on morality, it won't matter because you won't be able to vote them out. The system will be so thoroughly rigged that winning becomes impossible. This isn't just hysteria. This isn't chicken. I'm not being Chicken Little right now. This is the documented playbook for competitive authoritarianism. We are watching it. We have watched it happen in real time in multiple countries. Democracies don't die overnight with tanks in the street and dramatic coups. It's always gradual. As I said in the last episode, always through 1,000 small cuts. One day you just wake up and realize too late. So when someone tells me that they won't vote for Kamala Harris or Newsom or Waltz or Booker or whoever, I don't care, whoever the Democratic nominee is, because of one or two issues, I want to shake the ever-loving shit out of them and scream, okay, cool. Well, if the Republican wins, there won't be a Palestine to advocate for because we're going to lose our democracy. There won't be climate policy at all. There won't be healthcare reform. You'll be lucky if you have it. There won't be labor protections or LGBTQ plus rights or reproductive freedom or any of those other things that you claim to care about. There will just be fascism. And fascism doesn't give a fuck about your principles. And you know what the right understands that we apparently don't? Power is everything. If you don't have power, your values mean absolutely nothing. They're just nice little thoughts that you have, while Republicans implement their agenda. The right will vote for literally anyone. A thrice married adulterer, a fraudster, a rapist, a wannabe dictator with the impulse control of a toddler, because they understand that winning is the only thing that matters. And as much as I hate to admit it, they're right. They are completely right. So here's my message to anyone who's thinking about sitting out 2028, voting third party, or, writing in Bernie Sanders or AOC, just because the Democratic nominee isn't pure enough for your refined sensibilities. Grow the fuck up. This is not a game. This is not about your moral superiority. This is not about sending a message to the DNC about, how principled you are and how you and your friends on Twitter are too good for that. This is about whether we will still have a functioning democracy in 2030. I know that compromise feels gross. I know it's disappointing that we can't have the revolution you want. I know it sucks to vote for someone who doesn't align with you 100% on every issue. And I agree with you because I feel the same way. But I refuse to take the bait and go that way. Because you know what's worse? Living under fascism because you were too principled to vote for a liberal. The stakes are too high now. The margins that we're seeing are way too thin. We are completely out of time for purity tests and ideological masturbation. So yeah, we are going to have to compromise. We are going to have to hold our noses and vote for the lesser evil. And I'm seeing that phrase, I'm not going to vote for the lesser evil. You better vote for the lesser evil because we have to build the biggest possible coalition. We need addition over subtraction, and we have to drag this country back from the brink by any means necessary. Because if we don't, there won't be a country left to save. And here's the thing, and this one's important, guys. I'm not your enemy. Despite everything I've said in this episode, despite all the ways I've criticized progressives or, whatever, guys, we're on the same team. We align 99.999% of the way. Can we please find a compromise? We both want the same outcomes. Universal health care, affordable housing, free college, living wage, labor unions, racial justice, gender equality, LGBTQ plus rights, climate action, criminal justice reform, no more wars, reproductive freedom. I want all of that. You want all of that. We are fighting for the same future. We just disagree on tactics and strategy. Well, I guess timeline too. We both believe that the wealthy and powerful are rigging the system against working people. You think capitalism itself is the problem? I think it's the unfettered, unregulated capitalism that's the problem. But we both agree that Jeff Bezos paying less in taxes is fucked up and that, his warehouse workers, their low pay is obscene. We agree that Wall Street got bailed out while homeowners got foreclosed on. We agree that the system is designed to benefit the few at the top at the expense of the many. We're both angry about it. We just channel our energy and anger differently. And I might disagree with some of the tactics and rhetoric around identity politics, but I believe that Black Lives Matter, that trans rights are human rights, that immigrants deserve dignity and due process. We have, in my opinion, to me, we have a moral obligation while we're on this planet to create a more just and equitable society. We might just frame it differently, but we want the same world. We both want to win too. I know you do, but can we agree to fight like hell in the primary for the candidate we want, but then unite behind whoever wins the nomination? Can we just agree to push the nominee to the left without threatening to completely abandon them if they don't go far enough? Can we agree that once we do win, once we have the power back, that then we can fight about policy details? That we can debate single payer versus public option or, income taxes or whatever after we've secured democracy? Because the truth of the matter, if you listen to a single word that I said, I need you to understand that we need each other. Liberals need progressives to push the Overton window left, energize young voters, to keep us from getting too comfortable, which the Democratic Party has gotten too comfortable for decades now. We need you to hold us accountable. Progressives, you need us to actually win elections in purple states, to build coalitions with the moderates to bridge that gap, swing voters to get passable legislation. Neither one of us can win alone. Liberals without progressives just become centrists who stand for nothing and get rolled on. Progressives without liberals just become perpetually, small, far left minority. We are better together even when we are bitching and moaning like a dysfunctional family. Because at the end of the day, we are the only side fighting for a future where healthcare is a right, where workers have any sort of power, where the planet is livable, and where everyone has dignity and opportunity regardless of race, gender, or sexuality, or background or class. The right isn't going to give us that. They're going to give us more tax cuts for billionaires, more restrictions on voting rights, more environmental destruction, and, as we're seeing now, more cruelty toward the vulnerable. And that's what really this comes down to. And look, I know this episode has been a lot. I know I've been kind of harsh at times, and I know some of you are pissed at me right now, and that's fine. Get mad, write me angry emails, post your takes on Twitter, comment on Instagram. I can take it. But I hope you're hearing the actual underlying message here beneath the snark and the cursing and, whatever, is that we're on the same side, guys. We have to be. Because if we're not, we lose. And if we lose, everyone suffers. That's it for today, guys. Thank you so much for listening. Sorry, I really had to get on my soapbox today. But again, if you've enjoyed this episode, please follow the show on Instagram. That's my primary platform. I don't know why. I think I'm just too lazy to go through and engage on everything. But it's Instagram, We Saw the Devil Podcast, Facebook and Twitter at We Saw the Devil, WeSawTheDevil.com, and then Patreon, surprise, 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 We Saw the Devil. I will be back this week with a Patreon-only episode, and surprise, surprise, it's actually going to be true crime focused. And beyond that, guys, have a wonderful rest of your week, and I will see you on the flip side later this week as well. Until next time.